Okay, what's up YouTube? This is J-Man Time, and today I have another abandoned warship video for you guys today. Today's video is going to be on one of the last of the Kriegsmarine's heavy warships of the Second World War. Now, many have asked the question, whatever happened to all of those heavy surface ships from the Second World War that were used by the German Navy? What happened to all those destroyers, those cruisers, those patrol boats, those flagships, and all those other heavy surface warships? Now, there are some U-boats left and a few torpedo boats, but what happened to all those heavy ships? Well, unfortunately, most of those ships were scrapped or used for target practice after the war, but one of the big girls still remained. And that ship is the DKM Hela from 1940. The Hela is a strange warship. She is listed as an aviso. An aviso is a strange type of warship. It is a warship that can be used as either a corvette, a messenger ship, a gunboat, a command ship, a fleet tender, or even as an auxiliary destroyer or gunboat. And Hela played all of those roles during the Second World War. The ship is listed as a fleet tender or floating tender in German, and that is basically a type of warship that is normally used as a command center for smaller ships like torpedo boats, mine layers, or mine sweepers, also known as ram boots in German. And during the time that Hela served in the Second World War, this was mostly her role. Built between 1937 and 1940 and commissioned on October the 16th, 1940, the Hela entered the German Navy as a fleet tender for the R-boat series of minesweepers/mine layers. These were 60 to 100 ton warships that were used to either mine or sweep the areas around Germany. 1941, during the second year of World War II, the Hela was used as a messenger/transport ship for high-ranking German leaders. On the 5th of May 1941, Hela brought Adolf Hitler to Gdynia. Gdynia is an area in Poland or a port city in Poland. She brought Hitler there for Hitler to assess the German army in occupied Poland. Hela visited the German battleship Bismarck along with several other warships where they escorted the Bismarck to the Denmark Strait, which would eventually lead to Bismarck's battle with HMS Hood later on in the month of May, and eventually lead to the sinking of the battleship Bismarck. So one could say that the DKM Hela is one of the last heavy surface ships to encounter or be part of Bismarck's escort fleet. Remember, the Bismarck had a variety of different escort ships, but her main escort ship was the German heavy cruiser Prince Eugen, but Hela, along with several other smaller warships, were temporary escort ships for Bismarck and other heavy warships of the German Navy or Kriegsmarine. Later on, between 1941 and 1945, between those years, the DKM Hela acted more as both a corvette and as a patrol vessel for the Kriegsmarine in the areas between Germany and the Baltic states. During that time period, she did come under several air raids, but was never seriously damaged. Finally, the last air raid occurred on the 16th of April 1945, where the DKM Hela came under an air attack from British warplanes flying over the German city of Swinesmode. But again, she only suffered light damage from British machine gun fire from these British aircraft. By the time the war came to an end, the Hela's last role was as a troop ship helping to transport German sailors or soldiers and sailors from the Baltic regions during the collapse of the German army on the Eastern Front. Her last mission was to transport German soldiers to the city of Eckertford, and this was basically her last, or from the city of Eckertford, and this is pretty much her last role in the war. When Germany finally surrendered, the DKM Hela was surrendered to the British Navy. Later on, after World War II, the Hela was sold to the Soviet Union in 1946. During her time in the Soviet Union, Hela was both used as a temporary patrol boat, but later on in the 1950s and 60s, she was used as a private yacht for Soviet leaders. Finally, after the fall of the Soviet Union, a year after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1992, the Hela remained one of the last active surface ships of the former German Kriegsmarine, and she was pretty much the last heavy ship by 1992, the last surviving heavy warship of the German Kriegsmarine. All of the other ships had basically been scrapped by this point, or had been used as target practice by the victorious Allies during the Cold War. In 1995, still serving as a private yacht in the now Russian Federation, a fire broke out in the Hela's engine room in February 1995, damaging many of her internal components and rendering the ship useless under her own power. In 1996, the ship was finally decommissioned and used as a housing ship named the PKZ-14 and was later put up for sale. Between the years 2000 and 2007, several people did attempt to buy the Hela, but finally in 2007, an Italian businessman by the name of Mr. Fausto Corradini purchased the Hela in order to convert her into a luxury yacht. Between 2007 and 2012, most of the Hela's superstructure and many of her original armaments and fittings were stripped off in order to convert her into a luxury yacht. But since 2012, it seems that the construction has halted. And as of 2018, the hull of the DKM Hela still sits at a Russian marina in the Black Sea. So as of this video, all that remains of the DKM Hela is her original hull, her engines, and pretty much all of her superstructure has been removed, including all of her gun mounts, but the ship is still afloat and in a good enough condition for restoration. Now, this is the part of the video where I ask you guys, what would you do? Would you continue converting the Hela into a luxury yacht so she can live a second life as a luxury vessel? Or would you have the ship converted back into its original form and preserved as a museum ship? Now, there are many people online, especially fans of old German warships, who want the DKM Hela turned back into her original form and preserved as a lasting reminder of the German Kriegsmarines. Now, today, there are only several other warships remaining from the old German Navy of the Second World War, mostly a few torpedo boats, one ram boat or R boat, which was a type of minesweeper / mine layer, the very type of warship that Hela worked with during the Second World War, and there are a few U-boats still remaining, but the DKM Hela is the last of Carl Dönitz' big girls, or one of his last heavy warships still afloat. I'm pretty sure there's probably one or two other ships, but a lot of these World War II German vessels are pretty hard to track down. After World War II, a lot of these ships were converted into civilian vessels, and most of them have pretty much been lost in the infinite amount of trade that happens in Europe. These ships have been traded off to different countries and modified over and over again. So it took me a long time to find this DKM Hela. And I was actually surprised to find out the ship was actually still in Russia. Many of the German ships that were sold to Russia were simply scrapped by the Soviet Union in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And the ones that were still in service usually ended up at scrap yards where they eventually either rusted away or were sold to foreign companies to be broken up for scrap metal overseas. So I'm actually surprised that the Russians had managed to keep this ship for so long. If you ask me personally, I believe that the DKM Hela, or the German Aviso Hela, should be restored back to her original form, and she probably should serve as a reminder or as a floating memorial to the German sailors of the Second World War. Now, a lot of people don't like the Nazi German government or the National Socialist government, but you got to remember, these are still people. I mean, the sailors on board the ships, most of them didn't have the same mindset as the German government. I mean, even Karl Dönitz, the head of the German Navy during the Second World War, even he and Hitler didn't agree on a lot of things. And Karl Dönitz wasn't really one of the, ethno-nationalist types. He was just a World War I veteran who had been put into a high position of power within the German Navy, just like many of the other commanders within the Kriegsmarine / German Navy. So I think there should be at least one heavy warship preserved from that time period from the German Navy or from the Kriegsmarine. We already have a bunch of torpedo boats and other smaller, vessels that are under 500 tons. And the Hela is the last of the 1,000 plus ton vessels. Now, the Hela's displacement was 2,520 tons. The ship's main armament was two 105 millimeter 4.1 inch L-45 main guns, and she also had one 37 millimeter L-83C/L-39 flat gun or automatic flat gun / autocannon or anti-aircraft autocannon, and she also had two 20 millimeter L-30 or flak Villain 30/38 fully automatic autocannons. These were her anti-aircraft armament. The 37 and 20 millimeter cannons were the anti-aircraft armament of the Hela. Ship's main propulsion were two manned diesel engines, and she had a speed of 20 knots or 37 kilometers per hour. The ship had a crew that changed from time to time, but the ship's crew numbers were between 108 and 259. So making Hela the last of Karl Dönitz's fleet-sized warships of the Kriegsmarine. And today the ship still survives in the Black Sea. And right now she has been stripped of her superstructure, but so far it doesn't seem like nothing has been happening with the ship since the year 2012. So hopefully the Russians don't scrap the ship, and I hope the ship is at least used. I mean, if they're not going to convert it back into its original form and preserve her as a museum ship, if they're going to convert her into a yacht, then that's fine too, as long as the ship isn't scrapped, as long as she is still afloat and is still usable, as long as she's still around, that's all that matters, So yeah, that was basically it. The DKM Hela from 1940, literally the last of the heavy warships of the German Kriegsmarine, or the German Navy of the Second World War. If you like this video, you can rate, comment, and or subscribe. And until next time, this was J-Man Time signing off.